Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name's Dan Simpson. I'm a Senior Training Officer from the Courts and Tribunals Digital Services Program. And welcome to today's webinar on the prosecution review of a registry committal. Thanks for joining. Also on the call with me today from the DSP team are Guy Roberts and Simon Morrow, who will be monitoring and sharing content via the chat function as we go through the session today. This is the first of two demonstration webinars to assist yourself in the readiness for the release of the Registry Committal Application on the online services portal, which goes live on the 28th of July next week. This will directly replace the existing Registry Committal Application that this pilot group has had access to via the Legal Practitioners portal over the past 12 months or so. Each of these webinars will be recorded and available for a limited time to allow you to refer to them during the first few weeks after go live. Your attendance in this webinar today is consent to be included in these recordings. Before we dive into the content of the session, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands, seas and waterways of each of the locations that we're joining this meeting from today, and pay my respects to elders, both past and present. I myself am joining from Yaggara and Turrbal land. So we've got 30 minutes scheduled for today's session. Questions are welcome as we go through the presentation. I'd encourage you to pop your questions into the chat, which will be monitored, as I've mentioned already. Additional or unanswered chat questions can be asked in the dedicated question time that we'll hopefully have at the end of the session. Your cameras and mics have initially been turned off. This will help with connectivity and minimise any distractions, but these will be turned back on during the question time towards the end of the session. Finally, just a quick mention that today's webinar will be delivered using a test environment. Hence, you will not see any real data or cases during the demonstration. So what's the agenda for the session? We'll start very shortly. I'll hand over to my colleague Guy, who will explain the why around the OSP and what will be happening to the Legal Practitioners portal. Then I'll return back to myself. I'll define the learning objectives of the session. We'll review the overall registry committal workflow and how that's changed. And then I'll dive into a demonstration where we'll start by looking at how to launch and register onto the new online services portal, which is the new platform, as I just mentioned, that'll be hosting the digital registry committal applications and replacing the Legal Practitioners portal that you may already be familiar with. Once in the OSP, I'll take you through the steps required to review and approve registry committal applications, and you'll get to see how similar to the LPP this new platform is. And finally, we'll finish by opening the floor, as I mentioned, to any questions and sharing a link to the registry committal page on the court's website, where you'll find all the training resources that you'll be able to refer to as well. So right now, I'll just hand over briefly to Guy.
Dan, just quickly providing some background. So some of you on the call may have been around for the launch of the Legal Practitioner portal, where the online registry committal applications were first logged. During the 8-week pilot, there had been some ongoing performance and technical limitations that were found through the portal, in which case we have been doing some analysis and found the portal was unscalable for future use. So in the background, we've been busy building it into a new platform, which utilises Microsoft Dynamics 365, has a much more larger processing space, able to handle much more applications from more locations around Queensland to enable us to scale out to larger areas rather than our original pilot sites of Brisbane, Rockhampton and Cairns. So following the launch of the OSP from the 28th of July, we will be looking to decommission the LPP as a platform that's not scalable. So next Monday's go live, any new registry committals applications will need to be submitted through the online services portal, and therefore any in progress applications that are in the LPP The LPP will remain open for 4 weeks to allow the system to progress, or the registry to process any applications that are in progress. Before 4 weeks later, as of the 22nd of August, being the Friday, the LPP will be decommissioned. There won't be any data migration set up to go any applications in progress from the LPP through to the online services portal. The portal had never been set up for it to be a full case management system, just more that online application and lodgement area for the work to handle at the registry side of things. So timeline, you can see down the bottom there. At the moment, we're going through some demonstrations, both with registry staff as well as with our external users, prosecutors being the people today, as well as defence lawyers who will be submitting the original application. From next Monday, it will be go live, new apps only in the LPP, existing apps only in the LPP, or new apps via the online services portal. During that 4-week transition, we'll finalise any in progress apps, and then from the 22nd of August, it'll be online services portal only for the online registry committal process. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Guy. So as promised, I'll quickly explain the learning objectives for today's session. So by the end of this, hopefully you'll know how to connect to the OSP, the online services portal, how to locate and review a registry committal application that's requiring prosecution review for your agency, how to approve a registry committal application, return and reject a registry committal application, and that final point on where to access further information on registry committals. So that's the training material that will be available via the course website. So as you may be familiar with already, using the Legal Practitioners Portal, Registry Committal Online Application aims to streamline the application approval process by enabling collaboration between defence and prosecution digitally pre-lodgement. The workflow follows the legal requirements for lodging registry committals and includes integrated data sources such as quick, rules-driven alerts, notifications, trackable process and automated distribution of outcomes and documents. Only legal practitioners, law firms, prosecuting agencies and registry staff are permitted to use the registry committal process. Self-represented litigants are not legally able to commit a matter via the registry committal. They must use the court committal process to commit an indictable offence to a higher court. Now, you may have noticed from the workflow that I'm sharing that there's been a change at step 3. So previously with the LPP, the prosecution review was returned back to the defence, who then submitted it on to registry. Now you, the prosecutors, will complete your review, and on completion of that, it is forwarded directly to the registry with an automatic email notification being generated and sent to the defence team, informing them of that progress. So right now we'll start the demonstration, starting with a demo on how to register first time onto the online services portal. So, as mentioned in the intro, I will be using a test environment, which will, in all intents and purposes, look identical to the live production site, but of course, production will have actual cases and applications within it. So when you launch the website to the online services portal, you'll see a screen similar to this asking you to log in. Now, I'm going to log in as myself today. When you log in, it will give you a couple of options. It'll ask you to connect using single sign-on. So for those who have a Queensland Justice or Queensland email account, they can use single sign-on. So the likes of the Queensland or Police Prosecution Services, etc., will be able to use single sign-on. Those in CDPP, who I believe we have a number on the call today, will need to use a standard digital authentication. So you'll be using the login with digital ID option, which will give you the ability to log in via MyID or QDI. For the purposes of today, I will use single sign-on though. And there will be more details available via the court's website on how to connect and register onto the online services portal. So first time login, it will ask you to also register. So you'll get this form here where you'll have the choice of what your role is within the OSP. So you can see here we've got prosecutors, law firms, self-representing litigants. Self-representing litigants, they can log on and register via the OSP, but they wouldn't be able to use the Registry Committal Application. There will be other applications available for self-representatives to use. So I'll select Prosecutor for today. My name and email address is automatically populated. For, again, example, CDPP, if you're using a MyID, when you log on and authenticate, your name will come through, and potentially your personal email address may populate, depending on what email address you've configured your MyID account with. Now, that can be changed. Whatever you change it to here, when any email notifications get generated by the OSP, they will get sent to that email address. So in that instance, if using MyID, you can change that to your work email address. Then we'll just throw in a telephone number and select the prosecuting agency that you'll be working with. And of course, you will select the appropriate one. For the purpose of this example, I will choose Queensland Police Prosecution Corps. Now, when joining your agency, you will need to request a joining code from the administrator of your agency. So there will be a representative within your agency who will be managing the registration process and effectively authenticate accounts to join. So you will need to request the code from those individuals. Again, more information around that for the administrators will be available via the court's website. So I've selected the Brisbane Police Prosecution Corps here. You'll see there's a selection of options there based on the pilot group. And the code for this example is simply 12345, whatever the code is that's been provided by your organisation administrator. Towards the bottom, we then have a couple of T's and C's and collection notice information that we need to review. So, of course, we would read that diligently and observe all of that information. So acknowledge both of those. And then to complete the registration, we just agree to those terms and conditions and collection notice information. It's not until you tick that box that you'll notice that the register button then becomes enabled. So as I click register, what that will do is that will send my request to the OSP, the Online Services Portal. There we go. And we'll eventually get a message informing me that my account is pending approval. So this is when the administrator of your organisation would need to log on to the OSP. They'll get an email notification informing them that someone wishes to join that agency. They will log on to the OSP, and via their screen, they can manage the users. Now in here, you'll see that I'm logged in currently as Sam Singh, and I have had a request come through from Dan Simpson to join this organisation. And they would, of course, accordingly reject or approve that. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I will approve that. That was just on a separate screen. If I now come back to the screen I started at, I will simply need to just quickly log out, because in the real world, this is likely to occur over a slightly more extended period of time. And then if I log back in using single sign-on again, I will not be required to register, and it will take me directly into the Online Services Portal. And there you can see I'm logged in as Dan Simpson, and I'm associated with the Brisbane Police Prosecution Corps. And that's when I'll then have visibility of the various different applications that are available via the Online Services Portal, of which the Registry Committal is, of course, our focus today. So when I click Registry Committal, it'll take me into a dashboard that will show all of the current Registry Committal applications associated with my agency, Brisbane Police Prosecution Corps. Now, initially on entry to this screen, it will default to only show those applications that are currently awaiting prosecution review. So you'll see all of these have a prosecution review status. They have an application ID and, of course, the name of the defendant and the cases that have been assigned to that application. The filter, as I've said, is automatically applied to prosecution review. That does not mean that you cannot see applications that are at other stages. If I remove that filter, you'll notice that I have visibility of those applications that have been completed, those that are at the verify or perhaps registry process stage. And of course, if I wanted to filter this list, which will potentially become quite extensive, I can use a search by application name or by application code. So if I reapply a prosecution review filter, I'll just choose one of these. I'll choose the top one first of all. You'll see the review button over on the right-hand side. As I click that, it'll take me into that application. And we can see this application is awaiting prosecution approval. It has 3 charges associated with it, as indicated by the summary section here. As I continue to scroll down, it's currently at step 2 of 5, which is based on that workflow that we saw a little earlier, the prosecution review step. This little information button will remind us what the other steps are within that particular workflow. The continuing down, we then have the defendant's details. Okay, their acknowledgements and consents, etc. And as I continue to scroll down, we then come across the charges. Now, what you'll notice also as I've moved down to this point in the list, that summary information that we saw right at the top of the form has now become this little floating toolbar. So for those situations when you have an exceedingly long list of charges that maybe scroll across multiple screens, so to speak, as you go through, that summary will update accordingly. So you'll clearly see how many are still awaiting action, how many you've approved or rejected as you're scrolling through that extensive list. In this scenario here, I only have the 3 charges. We can clearly see and approve a reject button against each of the charges. We have the ability to expand and collapse these charges. Again, that can be potentially useful when you've got dozens and dozens of charges there. If I collapse all, you can see that it minimizes them, and then you can expand each one individually as you see fit. I'll keep them all expand for the time being. We'll keep it nice and simple with this one. We can see 2 of the charges have been committed, 2 and 1 has been a substitution has been requested, and we can see that the bench charge sheet has been uploaded against that as well. So if I were to reject any of these charges, it will require me to provide a reason for that rejection. I'll do that on the next case. Let's stick with this one and just approve all 3. As you approve or reject, you'll see the color beam on the left-hand side of each of these charges will change to reflect the choice that's been made. So in this instance, I've approved all 3. As I continue down towards the bottom of the form, we have the details about the legal practitioner of the defence team. We have the details associated with the prosecuting agency and any attachments that have been associated with any of the charges above. So we're right down the bottom now, and we just need to finish this off by acknowledging these 2 statements here. And because we approved all 3, we can submit this application for approval. As I click on that, the screen will just update and eventually will come up with a confirmation message saying that that has been approved. It has now moved, as you can see here, onto step 3, which is the registry process step, and I can return back to the dashboard. Now, returning back to the dashboard, you'll notice it has again applied the prosecution review filter. So where previously we had 4 applications, we now only have 3 because we have now approved that one and it's moved on to the next stage. So I think it was RC 1030. If I remove that filter, There's the 1030 record that I was just working on, and we can see it's now at that registry process stage. All right, let's look at how we go about rejecting one. So I'll filter again to only show those that require prosecution review. I'll select the next one, which is this 1029. There are only 2 charges on this one. So what I might do in this scenario is I might actually reject the entire application. Now, of course, you can reject individual charges, or if you've got 2 dozen charges, rather than go through and go reject, reject, reject against each and every one, if you scroll to the bottom of the form, we can reject the application in its entirety. What that will do is then provide you with a text box that is allowing you to provide information that's general to all of the charges within this application. So you would enter the reason that is associated with whatever charge is in that list and reject that application. That will send whatever information that you've shared there back to the defence team. It will return the application back to a draft status. So it will no longer be visible in your dashboard. It will reappear in the dashboard of the defence team. And we can see down the bottom here that it's now been returned back to step 1, which was the draft stage for the defence team. So if I return back to the dashboard, we'll see we're now down to 2. That 1029 record has been returned back to draft. If I remove this filter again, yes, it will show you all the applications that are applicable to you, but only those that have at least reached that registry, that have at least reached the prosecution review stage. So that 1029 record, which was previously here, has now been returned back to draft. So we can't actually see draft applications that are currently in process with the defence team. All right, let's look at the third option, which I mentioned, which was to just return an application due to one of the charges requiring an amendment or an alteration. So I'll choose 1029 this time, the final of the 3. As before, we get the same information. It's awaiting prosecution approval. There are 3 charges. It's at stage 2 of 5. I scroll down. I see the 3. 2 are committed. 1 is amended. It indicates what the amendment is that needs to be made, so I can observe and review all of that information accordingly. Let's say I'll approve the top 2. The amendment I'm not happy with. Let's reject that, and we'll say whatever we need to say. Please correct accordingly. Now, as soon as you've rejected at least one of the charges, you are no longer able to submit the approval. So the green button at the bottom here becomes a return for amendments. All right. And it can see here the summary indicates that 2 have been approved, 1's been rejected, as per the summary up the top here as well. So I will return that for amendments. It will go back, inform the defence team with that message that I included against the associated charge, explaining the reason for that return, and we can see that it has returned back to the draft status, step 1 of 5. All right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover during the demo. Can't see any questions that have come through in the chat as yet. I'm just going to briefly return back to the PowerPoint deck to wrap up a little bit here. Now, as I mentioned, there will be training materials available via the court's website. So we have uploaded some user guides. We're in the process of uploading quick reference guides and some screen capture videos that you can refer to. This recording, as we also mentioned right at the beginning, the recording of this session will eventually be made available via that court site for, the first few weeks for you to refer to if you need a refresher or a reminder of what was covered during today's session. Now, this pilot group, Brisbane, Cairns and Rockhampton courthouses, have had the experience of using the Legal Practitioners Portal, hence why we're deploying this to those pilot locations initially. And hopefully you're comfortable seeing how similar the OSP is to the LPP, but is a faster, more stable and more secure environment. Over the course of the next 12 months, we will be migrating this to all courthouses across the state, with, of course, the target of completing this by the end of the financial year. So at this point, I will open the floor to any questions. If anyone has any, I will provide you with the ability to speak and share your webcam if you so desire, or if you'd rather just pop a question in the chat, feel free to do so. Otherwise, that pretty much brings us to the end of the demo that we had planned. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your virtual hand. If you're satisfied with the content that we've covered today, feel free to drop off the call and you'll find this recording available via the court's website over the next few days. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Tian. Might just stop the recording here, Guy, I think.